In the chapters following the giving of the Decalogue in the 20th chapter of the book of Exodus, we have a series of practical prescriptions. The goodness of our God is reflected in the way in which His compassion comes through in practical care for those in need, in, for instance, the care of the widows, orphans, and also those who need money, here in the 22nd chapter. This is not of the order of rubrics, but of expressed goodness and compassion. In the period of the Saviour, there is a desire on the part of some experts of the law to find the essence of that law, precisely because the number of prescriptions, including interpretative ones, had grown very large. And of course he answers in a way which would make much sense to them, because he takes precisely elements of the law and collates them, one from Deuteronomy and one from Leviticus. He does something similar in his own teaching at the Last Supper. He does not give many rubrics, he gives a new commandment. And therefore we have no excuse when it comes to serving the Lord. If, for the sake of correctness of rubrics, we jettison the other, the new commandment itself, then we have lost the center of attention and have deflected it to the periphery. In a monastery, this is always a threat. There can be many usages in a monastery, but if they are not enforced with that other element of charity, the new commandment, then there can be losing of the sight of the essence. We notice that in writing to the Thessalonians, in this very early bit of New Testament writing, St. Paul insists on the way in which joy has had an impact on people and how they have been a good example to others and have drawn people after them to the new faith. This too applies either in a prayer group or in a parish or in a monastery. If there is true joy and therefore charity, that is the best advert. He also indicates how his own preaching has been effective, indirectly of course, but he links it to the fact that it has had its effect because of their behavioral comportment and the way in which that has outworked itself. Your actions speak so loudly that I can't hear what your words are saying, says the old proverb. Well, we need to have something of that also in our community life. We see sometimes a very noble liturgy. We are moved sometimes by the sight of, for instance, monks filing out of choir. But if sometimes one goes into the interior life of a community, one might find a few surprises. And these are the ones that are going to have an effect in the long term. Because no matter what the cosmetics may be, if that charity is not the underlying dynamic, people will pick it up. I remember hearing this years ago. It was the case of a young man who had spent some years in the community where liturgy was well executed, and after eventually leaving, did put in a note to somebody who had had the responsibility for him. I was impressed by the way the liturgy was well executed, but I did notice that some of the fathers did not speak to each other. He had picked that up. Now, this matters because no solemnity can take the place of the new commandment. It's the same also in a prayer group. If one scratches the surface, one will often find, for instance, power struggles. What's going on there? Is it for the Lord? One may also find people on an ego trip. Again, is that drawing the Lord's blessing? On the other hand, if there is peace and calm, and if the Lord is free to reign, also in the attention given to him, then we can draw blessings and spontaneously the numbers will grow. With regard to this on parish level, it is important, but it must be correctly understood. We notice that the first commandment is on the vertical and the second on the horizontal. And therefore, if we have a notion of the horizontal which is so exclusive as to crowd out the vertical, e.g. when we think we have to talk in church so as to be charitable, there we are again deflecting the Lord's blessing. In Fatima, many things came through, but some came also through even after, for instance, Jacinta had gone from Fatima. When she was dying in Lisbon, she was given to understand by the Blessed Virgin that heaven was not pleased by talking in the chapel. And she was given this to understand with a certain insistence, to the extent that she wrote to the Cardinal at Lisbon itself to make this known from the Blessed Virgin. The Lord does not want people talking in church. Therefore, this is concrete. The will of God is not just abstract. It comes through in, as it were, concrete prescriptions flowing from the essence. To love God means to honour him, to enthrone him. And his house is to be called a house of prayer, in which there is charity, but charity according to the modality wished by God for his house of prayer, in such a way that his presence is the healing one, and we draw people unto him. The impact of seeing regularly a priest on his knees in prayer in church is a quiet advertisement which speaks volumes, far more than that of a rowdy priest who has to talk to everyone in the pews coming in and going out, and disturbing others from their prayer, and certainly detracting the attention from Jesus, who wishes to reign from the tabernacle. But charity also comes through in all our comportment, and there is a twinning of the two dynamics. If we are in love with Jesus, we will honour him in the one that he sends out of the blue right now to minister to. And that ministering is not necessarily a spectacular one. It might be just a warm welcome, one that has this unwritten message going through it all the time. You, right now, are the most important person in the universe, indeed the only person in the universe, and you have all my attention. I want to know your mystery, and you are not going to be judged. I remember hearing this actually years ago when I first got to the monastery in Italy, where eventually I was ordained. One of the guests just happened to come out with this: "No one judges you here." That had been a help to her. People feel straight away if they are being put in a category. There are no categories for God, only souls, and each soul has his unfathomable mystery, to be loved into being with the inseparable dynamic of the twinned love of God and man.